My wedding gown, pristine, untouched white, whispered against ancient stone as I climbed toward the altar, sunlight pouring through stained glass like liquid gold. Perfection hung in the air. Then Mrs. Mildred's voice sliced through the sacred silence like a blade through silk. "You don't belong here." The scrape of chairs, whispers spreading like wildfire. My pulse thundered as the woman who'd shattered my childhood hurled a folder onto the holy ground. "Your father's will, marry him, and you forfeit everything." What they didn't know, what no one suspected as they watched me standing there, was that I'd already opened that file. And in that singular moment of revelation, I understood. This wasn't my wedding day. This was war. The memory strikes me still, the Belmont Estate's back garden, drenched in pine, scent and fresh, turned earth. My father would crouch among rose bushes while I perched on the weathered stone near the ancient well, stealing glances at Declan and read beneath the sprawling maple. That boy with luminous eyes never carried the arrogance that poisoned the others. Once he knelt before me, offering a crimson rose, his voice barely audible. "It's beautiful because your hands made it grow." I smiled, blind to the seed being planted, a feeling that would smolder silently for years to come. Our cottage stood behind wooden fencing, cramped and low-ceilinged, but its windows burned bright each night. My father would sit mending torn gloves, inspecting tomorrow's tools. Words came rarely, but every line carved into his son, weathered face told stories of patience, of loyalty, of decades spent serving others. He never voiced complaints. "Do honest work, you'll earn your place," he'd say, but he couldn't see what I saw. I didn't want a place. I craved to be seen, to be equal. When Declan left for boarding school, silence reclaimed the garden. I matured surrounded by pruning shears and fertilizer, desperately trying to forget those sun-drenched afternoons watching him read beneath the maple. Then one afternoon, while gathering dried branches, a gleaming black car materialized at the gate. Declan emerged taller now, composed, yet wearing that achingly familiar smile. His eyes found mine. "Roxana, I thought you'd gone." My soil-stained sleeves trembled as I fumbled with my gloves. "Still here, my father still serves your family." He paused, something flickering in his expression. "I'm grateful you remained." From that moment, he invented reasons to visit needing fresh air, he'd claim. But truly, he came to talk. We discussed trivial things, blooming roses, sparrows nesting in the trellis. Yet beneath those ordinary words pulsed something profound, unspoken. He no longer saw me as the gardener's daughter. He saw me as an equal, though society's cruel judgment loomed between us. I fought to maintain distance. Mildred, his mother, had looked at me once with eyes that could freeze blood. That day, she'd caught me handing Declan and pastries my father had baked. She glided closer, voice honeyed, but each word razor, sharp. "How charming, but servants must understand boundaries. Roxana, not everything is yours to touch." My head dropped, heart constricting. But when I turned away, Declan stood there, eyes darkening with fury. "Mother, I invited her." Her reply dripped with venom. "That's precisely what makes it unforgivable." She departed, expensive perfume lingering like poison in the air. After that day, Declan grew more determined. I grew more terrified. Rumors infected the Belmont estate like disease, the air seduced by the gardener's daughter. I became the target of every sideways glance, every whispered judgment. My father discovered the gossip, but offered only this: "You can't defeat their world, Roxana." I remained silent, but inside, a flame ignited. When Mr. Lawrence Declan's father died, the estate drowned in manufactured mourning. Visitors arrived speaking empty condolences, but Mildred's eyes held only impatience. She cared nothing for grieving her husband. Only reading his will mattered. I helped my father clean the garden after the funeral. That evening, he summoned me to the garage where his ancient toolbox waited. He extracted a flash drive, pressing it into my palm. Mr. Lawrence entrusted me with this before death took him. He said if anything happened, give it to you. Why me? I'm nothing to him. He cut me off, voice barely audible. He said he owed our family more than you could imagine. I searched his eyes for hidden truths, but he looked away. Something remained unspoken. In my room, I connected the drive to my battered laptop. Folders appeared, contracts, trust documents. The beneficiary name blazed clear, Roxana Hale. Disbelief paralyzed me. My father appeared later, standing silently behind me before speaking. Tell no one, especially Mrs. Mildred. Mr. Lawrence had his reasons. Perhaps you should know. Some debts transcend money. I turned to face him. What debt did he owe us? Weariness aged his features. He promised to protect our family after your mother's death, but ultimately only I remained. Perhaps guilt haunted him. Do you believe his intentions were pure? I don't know, but Lawrence Belmont never acted without purpose. Sleep evaded me that night. I reopened every folder, examining each line, studying Mr. Lawrence's signature dated 2 weeks before death. One small audio file caught my attention. When played, I heard coughing, then Mr. Lawrence's raspy whisper, Hector, safeguard this. I've committed too many mistakes, but I cannot let them touch her. I froze. Her, who was she? Part of me wanted to believe he meant my mother, but instinct whispered it wasn't that simple. The following morning, when I showed my father the drive, he remained silent for an eternity before nodding. Keep it, someday you'll need it. I pressed for answers, but he returned to the garden, his hand trembling slightly as he drove the pruning knife into earth. I didn't know those would be his last conscious moments with me. A week later, he collapsed in the garden. They called it sudden heart failure. I believed them until I discovered a folded note in his pocket, half written. If you ever uncover the truth, don't believe what they say about Lawrence. The sentence ended abruptly. His handwriting trembled as though interrupted mid-stroke. I folded the note, hiding it inside my old notebook. Afternoon light fell across the photograph of my father and me before the rose garden, and I understood everything was shifting. Some secrets don't lie buried like roots. They grow in darkness, waiting for the day they'll surface and obliterate everything. I clutched the flash drive. Wind slipped through door cracks, carrying fresh soil scent. Somewhere beyond, the Belmont mansion blazed with light. While in my room, truth waited to be unearthed. I fled the church, white shoes catching on rain, slick tiles. Inside, sounds still echoed, whispers, scraping chairs, and above all, Mrs. Mildred's faint, victorious laughter. I moved quickly, as if glancing back would resurrect all the humiliation. My rain-soaked wedding dress clung heavily to my legs. I wrapped my arms around myself not against cold, but to prevent collapse in the street. A stranger passed, probably assuming runaway bride. They couldn't know I was escaping a world that never wanted me. When rain ceased, I found the bus stop blocks away. I collapsed onto the bench, clutching the wilted bridal bouquet. The white roses, streaked with mud, mirrored me ruined, but clinging to pride's last trace. I glanced at the clock, nearly 7 p.m. No food all day, surviving on pain and anger's remnants. My phone vibrated. Declan, certainly. I didn't answer. I didn't need more apologies. If he truly loved me, he wouldn't have remained silent when they humiliated my father. I thought of Hector, the man who'd bent his back in their garden his entire life, believing honest work earned respect. He was wrong. I rode the bus to the southern suburbs, where my small apartment sat in an old, water-stained building. Through the window, my reflection appeared, pale face, washed, away lipstick, hollow eyes. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She wasn't a bride anymore. She was someone discarded, nameless, penniless, alone. Home was dark. I switched on the light. Everything remained as it had been that morning before my world shattered. The ring box sat beside congratulatory cards from old friends. I picked one up, reading the handwritten note, wishing you true happiness. A bitter smile crossed my lips. True happiness, perhaps it was never meant for someone like me. In the bathroom, I scrubbed away smeared makeup tears and rain's damage. Cold water cascaded down my neck, washing away white powder like ashes. When I looked up, the mirror reflected swollen, crimson eyes. I stared at myself until my chest slowly loosened. The pain no longer stabbed sharply. It had sunk deep, dull, heavy, like a wound beginning to scar. The phone rang again. This time I answered, "Roxana, I need to see you, please, just once." Declan's voice sounded sleepless. I answered softly, "You don't need to. Everything's crystal clear now." "No, you don't understand. I didn't know my mother would," I interrupted. "You knew she despised me, yet you let her control your own wedding. Don't claim ignorance." I could hear regret in his breath, but too late. When he whispered, "I'm sorry," I only replied, "You should have said that before I walked away beneath hundreds of judging eyes." I hung up, tossing the phone onto the sofa. In the small room, only rain tapping against windows remained. I pulled the curtain aside, gazing at the wet street. Lamplight reflected off pavement like shattered glass. I saw myself in it, broken but standing. Near midnight, I sat at the desk, opening my father's old notebook. The cover was worn, corners stained with dried soil. I traced my fingers across each page. His handwriting was steady, firm, just like him. At the bottom, a small line, "Every seed needs sufficient darkness to sprout." I read it repeatedly until I realized tears were falling. Perhaps he meant sometimes to grow. We must walk through life's darkest passages. Outside, wind slipped through cracks, carrying damp earth's smell, the scent my father always brought home after garden days. I closed my eyes, picturing him standing among roses with that gentle smile and those sun-worn hands. The image calmed me. Even if the whole world abandoned me, I still had him, at least in memory. Close to dawn, I took scissors and cut through my wedding dress's lace layers. White fabric fell to the floor, light as snow. With each cut, the heaviness in my chest lifted slightly. When only smooth silk remained, I folded it neatly, placing it in the wardrobe. No reason to keep it, but I didn't burn it. I wanted it to remain as proof of the day I learned to stand alone. Sun rose, first light streaming through the small window. I made tea and took a deep breath. In the stillness, I heard birds singing outside, a simple sound I hadn't noticed in ages. The door shook slightly. I knew who stood outside. Declan hadn't given up. I looked at the door but didn't open it. I said quietly, "Leave, from now on. I don't need anyone's protection." I heard his footsteps retreat, then nothing. In that moment, I understood my life had crossed a threshold. I was no longer the girl who hid behind someone else for safety. I remained in my small Southern District apartment, where streetcars rolled by day and rain hummed softly on the tin roof by night. The apartment had one small window facing a laundromat, but for me, it was the only place where no one knew the name Belmont. I worked at a flower shop 2 blocks away, not from love of flowers, but because no one there asked questions. Every morning, I arrived early to open the shop, wipe counters, arrange chrysanthemums in metal buckets. Flower scent mixed with vase. Washing soap made me feel clean, as if rinsing off my past's dust. The shop owner, Mrs. Ruth, a woman in her 60s with neatly pinned silver hair, often said, "Ro, you have gentle hands. Only someone with a wounded heart can arrange flowers this beautifully." I smiled without replying. She didn't know that every time I arranged a bridal bouquet, something inside me tightened. I still remembered that day, the white dress, Declan's eyes, his mother's cruel laughter echoing through the church. At night after closing, I walked home. The street was empty, neon lights glimmering on wet pavement. I changed clothes, then opened my old laptop. My father's flash drive still lay in the drawer, wrapped carefully in his old handkerchief. The first time I opened it, I only wanted to hear his voice again, but the deeper I went, the more I realized I was stepping into a labyrinth. Dozens of files numbered irregularly, most were work notes, but one folder was named North Property LC. I opened it. Inside were sale contracts, bank statements, and brief audio recordings between my father, Hector, and Lawrence Belmont. I listened repeatedly, each word cutting deeper. I can't let Mildred know. If she discovers this, I lose everything. Hector, you're the only one I can trust. Lawrence's voice was low, strained. Then came my father's hoarse but firm. I've kept my promise for 20 years, but you owe my daughter the truth. The truth about what? I skipped ahead to the last file, the one that would later shatter everything inside me. Lawrence spoke weakly, as if battling pain. If I'm gone, this property belongs to Roxana. She's not Hector's daughter. She's my blood. I stumbled from my chair, gripping the table to prevent collapse. His words spun in my head heavy, suffocating. I was Lawrence Belmont's daughter. I looked at the only photo I still possessed of my father, him smiling, holding pruning shears, sunlight on his tan cheek. The man who had loved and raised me with his calloused hands had hidden a secret no one knew. Why hadn't he told me? Why had he chosen silence until the end? For many nights I couldn't sleep. I remembered once as a child seeing Mr. Lawrence come to the garden late, talking to my father. Back then, I thought it was merely about work, but now I recalled how Lawrence had looked at me that night. It wasn't an employer's gaze toward a worker's child. It was gentle, almost shy, something I was too young to understand. One afternoon, while arranging tulips at the shop, Mrs. Ruth called out, "Roe, someone asked for you, a man in a suit." I froze. When I stepped outside, he was gone, but a business card remained. Martin Huxley, financial advisor, Belmont Holdings. I held the card, heart pounding. So they knew I was still in Eugene. Perhaps Mildred wanted to ensure I wouldn't return, or worse. She feared I'd discovered something. That night, I sat by the open laptop. The screen's glow illuminated my face, highlighting the contract's words, Beneficiary Roxana Hale. The pieces finally assembled the reason Mildred despised me so intensely, why she destroyed the wedding, my father's bitter silence before death. She had known all along that I was Lawrence's daughter, the one entitled to touch the fortune she claimed as hers. I turned off the screen and leaned back. Outside, wind rattled the window frame. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Everything I once believed in, love, honor, justice, was shattered glass from a power game. I thought of Declan. As angry as I was, I knew he hadn't known the truth. He was probably another pawn in Mildred's hands. Like me, like my father, like Lawrence himself, the thought twisted my heart. I closed my eyes and listened to the fading rain. Only my father's voice echoed in my head. Don't let them touch you. They already had. They had destroyed my wedding, my dignity, and now my past. I clenched the flash drive in my hand. Thunder rolled in the distance, low and heavy. In that moment, I knew. Whether I wanted it or not, I had been pulled into the story of my own blood. And once truth had surfaced, there was no turning back. I met Ivy in a small cafe on the town's outskirts, where afternoon light streamed through windows and spread across the old wooden table. She was younger than expected, brown hair tied up, eyes sharp and calm like someone who'd witnessed more secrets than her age should allow. When I placed the flash drive on the table, she glanced at it and said, voice low but firm, "I know this. They said internally it was lost." I looked up, asking quietly, "Who are they?" "The people who decide who gets to live peacefully in the Belmont family," she said, lips pressed together. I worked for them for almost 3 years, long enough to know Mildred controls more than the company. She controls her lawyers, too. I studied her face, torn between trust and caution. Ivy opened her laptop, plugged in the drive, skimmed through files, then looked up, tone serious. If these documents are authentic, the property remains under a shell company's name. No transfer has been executed. That means you only need one step, a DNA test, to claim what's rightfully yours. Part of me still wasn't ready. I wasn't born to fight over inheritance, but when they stole my father's honor and ruined my life, what I wanted wasn't money. It was justice, Ivy continued slowly, but be careful. Once Mildred knows you're back, she won't rest. I nodded. Sunlight outside was fading, leaving only an orange streak across the coffee cup between us. In the rising steam, I heard my father's voice again. Don't let them touch you. That night, I returned to my apartment and opened every drawer, searching for anything that could prove my bloodline. In a small wooden box, I found the paper my father had hidden, a copy of an unsigned DNA request form. I smoothed it out, feeling like I was touching an unfinished farewell. I sat at the table and spread out everything: the recordings, the trust contracts, the old photos of my father and Lawrence Belmont. The desk lamp illuminated their distant faces, leaving only me in the middle alone among the evidence of a lifetime of lies. I replayed the recording of Mildred's voice from the wedding, her tone cold, each word cutting like a blade. My son doesn't need a girl like her. She'll taint this family's name. I stopped the playback, my hand tightening. Once her words would have wounded me. Now they only brought strange calm. This time I wouldn't let emotion lead me. I needed a plan precise, flawless. Mildred always believed I was weak, that all I could do was cry. She never knew that her cruelty had taught me how to stay silent, to watch, to remember. The next day I returned to the old Belmont estate where Hector had worked. The elderly groundskeeper still remembered me. He was surprised to see me, but after a few moments of silence led me to the corner of the yard where my father's rose bushes still grew. I knew there was something between your father and Mr. Lawrence, he said hoarsely. Mr. Lawrence came here the night before he died. They talked for a long time. Then he gave Hector an envelope. Do you know what was in it? I asked, holding my breath. No. But afterward, Hector told me if anyone asked, say he never received anything. Now I understand why. I thanked him and left the garden, heart heavy. Under the sunset, the red roses burned like fire, swaying in the wind. Perhaps my darkness had finally grown deep enough. That evening I called Ivy. I have a recording, I said. She admitted Lawrence hid the will. Excellent. Now you need two more things: the DNA confirmation and the original trust contract. I can help you make it all legal, but it must be done quietly. You'll help me to the end. I used to work for them, she said. I owe myself one chance to stand on the right side. I hung up, feeling both relieved and terrified. Every step I took now felt like walking on thin ice. One wrong move and Mildred would discover everything, then I'd lose it all again. In the days that followed, I lived between two worlds. By day, I worked at the flower shop. By night, I secretly gathered evidence. I found the doctor who used to work at the DNA testing lab Lawrence once used. The gray-haired man fell silent for a long moment when he heard the name Belmont, then said, I remember that case. There was one test result that was never returned to him. If you're truly the person in that file, I can verify it. I need that to restore my father's honor. The night before I sent all documents to Ivy, I sat alone in the dark room, lit only by a pale yellow lamp casting shadows on the wall. On the table lay the flash drive, the DNA test result, and the recorder containing Mildred's voice captured when she slipped during our meeting at the church. I replayed the final part. If Lawrence hadn't been foolish enough to hide the real will, that gardener's daughter would have stopped existing long ago. I closed my eyes. Her words no longer hurt. They only made me realize that sometimes a person's existence is itself proof of what others fear most. I placed everything into an envelope, sealed it, and wrote Ivy's name in the corner. When I stepped outside, the wind was strong, carrying the scent of dry grass and damp air from the river. My shoes struck the pavement in steady rhythm, each step echoing against my heartbeat. At the corner, the flickering sign of the flower shop reflected off the glass window, casting the words Hope Florals. I stared at it for a long time. Hope. I had never understood its meaning so clearly. Until that moment, I sent the envelope to Ivy the next morning. She simply said, "Let's begin." And in that instant, I knew that everything I had lost, faith, dignity, even my name, was slowly returning, not through forgiveness but through justice. To be honest, the name Declan had become a scar in my memory, a name that every time I thought of it sounded like the crack of something breaking inside me. I never wanted to see him again. But that night, when I heard the knock on my door and the winter wind howling down the hallway, I knew some memories, no matter how deeply buried, always find their way back. When I opened the door, he was standing there, not the man in light suits smiling at grand parties, but drenched, hair clinging to his forehead, eyes hollow and weary. Hallway light revealed something I'd never seen before on his face, remorse. "I need to talk," he said hoarsely, like someone who had traveled far. I crossed my arms, maintaining distance. I thought, "We'd said everything, Declan." He looked up at me. "My mother, she knows what you're doing," he continued, voice low and uneven. "She's had you followed." "And me too." When I protested her hiring a legal firm to handle the situation, she froze all my accounts and expelled me from the company. I lost everything, Roxana, the house, the car, the shares, everything. I kept my voice steady. "So what did you come here for?" "To apologize or to warn me?" "Not to apologize. I know that changes nothing. I came because I don't want what happened to your father to happen again." "What are you implying?" He looked at me, eyes filled with helplessness. "Do you really think Hector's death was an accident?" "My father tried to warn him, but he died before he could finish. Mildred may not have done it herself, but she has enough power to make the impossible seem ordinary." Inside me, fragments of old memories began stitching themselves together. My father's late night phone calls, the look in his eyes whenever he mentioned Lawrence Belmont, and his final words, "Don't believe what they say." Declan stepped closer, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what you're holding, but if it's evidence, be careful. She can make anything disappear, even people." I tried to hide the trembling in my hands. "You expect me to trust you after everything." He didn't look away. "I don't need you to trust me. I want you to live." Declan's gaze swept across my small apartment, the space he'd never seen and probably never imagined I'd be forced to inhabit. I could tell he wanted to say more, but he shook his head as if realizing that words no longer mattered. As he turned to leave, a gust of cold wind rushed in. I called out, "Declan." He stopped, looking back, eyes tired. "Thank you for telling me. But from now on, don't come here again. I understand." The door closed, his footsteps fading down the stairs. I caught my reflection in the window, unfamiliar, empty. I didn't tell him that I already had the real will along with the DNA confirmation Ivy had sent back. It was no longer speculation or doubt. Every piece of evidence proved the truth. I was Lawrence Belmont's daughter with full legal right to the fortune Mildred had been desperate to conceal. I opened my laptop. On the screen, an audio file of Mildred speaking with one of her lawyers was still playing. I replayed a section, her voice sharp and venomous. "That girl thinks finding the truth means she's won. Hector taught her too well. But this time I'll teach her that a last name isn't enough to stand against power." A chill ran down my spine. She knew. The phone buzzed, making me flinch. An unknown number. The message read, "If you don't stop, what happened to Hector will happen to you." Short, untraceable, no number ID. I tried calling back. The number didn't exist. Outside, streetlights flickered and a shadow moved quickly under the awning across the street. I turned off the light and drew the curtains. In the darkness, I could hear my heartbeat slow and heavy. I stepped onto the balcony, looking down at the narrow alley below. No one, only the wind rattling a metal trash can, but I knew someone was watching. The feeling was unmistakable, like the faint smell of cigarette smoke still lingering in the air. Someone had been there, close, waiting. I went back inside, locked the door, pulled out my phone, deleted every message, then removed the battery. The screen went dark, swallowing the room in stillness. I sat down on the floor, my back against the wall. Declan's words echoed over and over. "She can make anything disappear." But I had no intention of disappearing. I gripped the flash drive tightly in my hand. They could make people disappear, but they couldn't erase the truth stored inside it. The voices, the signatures, the secret Lawrence had left behind. I couldn't sleep for nights. After that anonymous message, every sound in the hallway, every shadow passing by the window made my heart tighten. But fear, instead of making me retreat, made my mind clearer than ever. If they dared to threaten me, it meant I was getting dangerously close to what they wanted buried. One morning, as I was organizing copies of files to send to Ivy, my eyes stopped at a faint line on my father's death report, cardiac arrest following sedation. I remembered it clearly. My father had never used sedatives, and he had no history of heart problems. That single line felt like a thorn. Lodged in my mind, one I couldn't ignore, I called Ivy immediately. "Ivy, I need you to recheck my father's medical records." "Something's wrong. What do you think?" "I think he didn't die naturally. Send me all the copies." "I'll request an internal review from the medical board, but be careful. If you're right, this could stir up something they've been hiding for 3 years." I hung up, heart heavy. I remembered the last time my father was conscious. He held my hand and said, "Don't believe what you see, believe what you feel." Now I understood. 3 days later, Ivy called back, "Roxana, I have what you need." We found the original hospital data. Hector's blood sample showed traces of midazolam, 3 times the safe dosage. That drug is only used for full anesthesia and requires special authorization. "Are you certain?" "Yes." "And one more thing." Ivy paused, voice dropping lower. "The hospital's hallway camera recorded Mildred Belmont visiting his room the night before he died. She was alone. Her name isn't in the visitor log. Do you have a copy?" "I do, but we must keep it confidential. If it leaks, they'll erase the entire dataset." Mildred's image flashed through my mind, the woman with pearl gloves, that polished smile, and eyes cold as steel. Her words at my wedding echoed sharply. "The gardener's daughter has no place in this world." She didn't want to erase me from her life. She wanted to erase every trace connected to Lawrence, including the man who had worked under her for 20 years. That night, I met Ivy at her small office behind an old bookstore. The room glowed under a desk lamp, piles of folders stacked everywhere. She handed me a flash drive. "This is the video copy, but be careful, Roxana." "If I were you, I wouldn't keep it at home." I nodded, my hand trembling slightly as I took it. "If it really was her, I won't let this be buried." Ivy looked at me, her eyes a mix of concern and respect. "I believe you. But remember, when you touch the past, you awaken the demons others spent their lives trying to hide." I left the office when it was already dark. The city glimmered with lights, but inside me stretched an endless shadow. I walked along the empty street, gripping the flash drive in my coat pocket. With every step, I could almost see my father, his bent back from years of labor, his rough hands, and his warm, hoarse voice calling me his little Roxy. Now I understood his death hadn't been fate. It wasn't peaceful. It was murder disguised as mercy. When I reached home, I plugged the flash drive into my computer and opened the video Ivy had sent. The screen showed a hospital hallway, grainy, but clear enough to reveal the figure of a woman in a long white coat, her face half hidden under the light. Mildred. She walked to my father's room, paused for a few seconds, then disappeared from frame. The clip lasted only a minute, but to me it felt like a lifetime. I paused, then replayed it. Each time I saw her movements more clearly, slow, deliberate, unafraid of being seen. The woman who had ruined my wedding, who had stripped my father of his dignity, now stood exposed in that moment where all her words dissolved into cold, undeniable truth. I leaned back in my chair, covering my face. No tears came, only the burning ache in my chest. The phone vibrating on the desk startled me. It was Ivy. I got word. She said quickly, "Someone's trying to breach the investigation database. If the data is deleted, that video will be the only proof left. Keep it safe." I won't let it disappear, just like I won't let my father's death mean nothing. After the call, I opened the drawer and took out my father's flash drive. I placed both drives side by side. One held the truth he'd left behind, the other held the evidence she had exposed. Two pieces of the same crime, I touched them both. My skin felt cold, but inside a fire was burning, the light of truth breaking through, bright enough to show me the path ahead. Now I knew my father's death wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a promise left unfinished, and from that night on, I began counting down the days, preparing for the moment I would force Mrs. Mildred Belmont to face what she had buried beneath her power and her name, her own guilt. The courtroom that morning looked like a stage lit under harsh white lights. The benches were lined neatly, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and paper heavy with tension. I sat in the front row, my hand gently gripping my father's old silver ring, the only thing left after his funeral. Across the table, Mildred Belmont sat upright, her dark green dress immaculate, as if she were attending a photo shoot, not the trial that could rewrite her family's legacy. I could feel her gaze cut across the room, sharp, contemptuous, confident. Even now, she believed power would save her as it always had. Ivy sat beside me, voice low and steady. When I say now, just nod. Don't let your emotions take over. I nodded slightly, trying to hide the pounding in my chest. The judge entered. Everyone stood. 3 short strikes of the gavel marked the start of the battle I had waited 3 years for. On Mildred's side, her attorney, Gerald Wesson Gray, haired calm, spoke first. He talked about a stranger, a scheme to seize family assets, a story built on forged lies. Each word landed like a needle, piercing what was left of my dignity. I didn't react. Ivy placed her hand on my arm, a silent signal. Let them speak. When he finished, Mildred stood. Your Honor, I am the lawful wife of Lawrence Belmont, the man who built Belmont Estate with his own hands. This so-called lost daughter is nothing but a pitiful attempt at extortion. I trust the court will protect my family's honor. Every word of hers sounded like a cold verdict, but then Ivy lifted her head, her tone unyielding. Your Honor, the plaintiff, if would like to submit additional evidence. The room went silent. A technician walked forward, plugging a flash drive into the large screen at the front. The light from the projector flickered across Mildred's face, and I saw it. The exact moment her confidence began to crack. The video played. A hospital corridor, harsh white lights, a woman in a long coat and hat, walking slowly toward Hector Hale's room. The footage was blurry, but the face was unmistakable, Mildred. The courtroom erupted in whispers. People in the back row leaned forward, murmuring. I looked at her, her gloved hand gripping her purse so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Ivy spoke clearly, each word deliberate. This footage was taken from the internal CCTV system of St. Florence Hospital on the night before Mr. Hector Hale's death. Mrs. Mildred Belmont's name does not appear in the visitor log, yet she was present on the 8th floor where Mr. Hale was hospitalized. Mildred's lawyer shot to his feet, shouting, "This evidence is inadmissible. There's no way to verify its authenticity." Ivy remained calm. Attached to the footage is a digital forensic report with verified hash values and a documented chain of custody, confirming no signs of alteration. Furthermore, we have independent toxicology findings showing that Mr. Hector Hale's blood contained midazolam levels consistent with medically induced deep sedation far above clinical guidelines, a drug accessible only to those with hospital clearance. The room held its breath. No more whispers, only the faint tap of the judge's pen against the desk. He looked up, expression stern. Mrs. Belmont, would you like to respond? Mildred rose slowly. She tried to smile, but her voice trembled. All of this is fabricated, a conspiracy meant to destroy me. And the DNA results, Mrs. Belmont, Ivy continued, not giving her a chance to breathe. We have DNA results verified by an independent lab in Portland, showing a 99.8% parent-child match between the preserved biological sample of Lawrence Belmont and Miss Roxana Hale, who is present here today. A murmur spread through the room. Mildred froze. Her lips parted then closed again, unable to form a word. I looked toward the photo of Lawrence hanging at the end of the courtroom. Beneath that calm face, his signature appeared clearly on the will projected on the screen. To my daughter, Roxana Hale. The judge skimmed the documents, then tapped his gavel lightly. The court recognizes Miss Roxana Hale as the lawful heir according to the original will of Lawrence Belmont. In addition, based on the visual evidence and forensic report, the court hereby orders a criminal investigation into the cause of Mr. Hector Hale's death. Mildred staggered, gripping the edge of the table to stay upright. Her pride vanished, replaced by cold panic spreading across her face. I remained seated, my hand holding tightly to the photo of my father, hidden in my jacket pocket. A low male voice spoke behind me, "Roxana." I turned. Declan. He stood there pale and thin, but his eyes were softer now, no longer afraid. Before I could speak, he stepped forward and lowered his head, voice trembling. "I don't deserve you, but I'm proud of you, more than I've ever been of myself." I looked at him for a long time. I felt no anger, no affection, a quiet stillness, as if a part of the past had finally closed on its own. I nodded slightly and whispered, "Thank you for coming." The judge concluded the session. The air in the courtroom felt lighter, yet I knew the real storm had only just begun. I rose and walked toward Mildred's table. She was still seated, eyes empty, glassy. I stopped right in front of her and said softly, but loud enough for everyone to hear, "You once said I didn't belong in your world." I tilted my head, meeting her gaze. "Now you're right, because I own it." The entire courtroom froze for that single moment until the court recorder beeped, confirming that every word had been captured. After the trial, the city seemed different, or maybe I had changed. Everything felt strangely calm. Even the streets that used to suffocate me now seemed gentle. I still passed Belmont Holdings each morning on my way to the law office to sign the final documents. But there was no pain or hatred left, only quiet detachment, as if I were looking at the empty shell of something that had died long ago. When the judge declared me the rightful heir, people expected an eruption of triumph. I had won, but it wasn't a victory with cheers. It felt like a slow melody, sinking quietly into the heart, leaving only the echo of what had been lost. Ivy told me I should leave Eugene for a while to rest, but I didn't go. I chose to stay because here was the land my father had devoted his life to, the northern property that Lawrence Belmont had hidden under a shell company's name. It was the place where he and my father once spent weekends experimenting with new crops, carefully recording every change in the soil. Now that land belonged to me. When I returned there, weeds reached up to my waist and the old wooden shed was nearly collapsed. I walked slowly, listening to the wind moving through the bare eucalyptus trees. The scent of damp earth and resin felt familiar. It was like meeting my father again with every breath. I knelt, touched the dark soil, and remembered his words. The earth never betrays those who care for it. I didn't want this place to become part of a cold inheritance, nor to be sold to investors who saw only profit. I wanted it to live again, not to honor the Belmont name, but to honor Hector Hale, the man who had spent his life cultivating in silence. I filed for a permit to build a vocational gardening center, naming it Hector Gardens, a place where low-income workers could learn skills, grow crops, and build a livelihood of their own. Many criticized me, saying I was wasting land worth millions of dollars, but I knew if my father were alive, he would have smiled. The following months were long, filled with dirt and heat. I worked with volunteers clearing weeds, reopening irrigation ditches, raising greenhouses, planting the first rows of flowers. My hands blistered from the shovel and hoe, but it didn't hurt. Every drop of sweat that fell on the ground felt like giving something back to the place that had once held his breath. One afternoon, while I was measuring the back plot, Ivy arrived with a freshly printed newspaper. "She's been indicted. She said simply. Mildred, yes. Charges of falsifying medical records and concealing evidence in the death of Hector Hale. The trial will begin in the fall. Some justice comes late, but at least it comes. I looked across the newly planted field. The afternoon sun bathed the young trees in trembling gold. Perhaps at last the earth has reclaimed the truth. On the opening day of Hector Gardens, the sky was clear and cool. Everyone who had helped came: carpenters, students, families struggling to find work. They brought cakes, coffee, and small bouquets. I wore a simple cotton dress, my hair tied back, standing on an old wooden platform serving as a stage. Ivy introduced me to the crowd, then stepped aside. I looked out across the wide green field, and my voice rose naturally, steady, calm. My father once taught me that to grow anything, you need patience and light. People are the same. We can't force a flower to bloom when the soil is still cold, and we can't force our hearts to heal while the wounds still bleed. But if we keep planting even one tiny seed, someday the green will return. The crowd applauded, and I smiled. In the distance, hundreds of young plants shimmered under the sunlight like reborn memories. After the ceremony, when everyone had left, I stood alone in the garden. The last rays of daylight spilled gold across the new trees, and for a moment I heard my father's laughter carried in the wind. I whispered softly, "I did it, Dad." I turned, heading toward the greenhouse, when a faint sound came from the gate. A man stood there, white shirt, a bouquet of lavender in his hands. Declan. He didn't step in, he stood watching. The breeze lifted a few strands of hair from his forehead, and his eyes were calm, no longer heavy with guilt. I nodded slightly, and he nodded back. He placed the bouquet at the base of the Hector Garden sign, smiling, a small, tired, but genuine smile, then turned and walked away. I watched his figure fade down the sunlit path. There were no tears, only a gentle warmth spreading through my chest. I bent down to pick up the bouquet he had left. The scent of lavender lingered soft and steady, like a goodbye that didn't need words. I set it on the greenhouse windowsill where the young plants were stretching toward the light. I knew there would still be challenges ahead, more darkness to face. But in this garden, where pain, loss, and rebirth had all taken root, I had found the most precious thing of all, peace within my own heart. Sometimes I look back on it all, my father, Declan, and the days when I thought I'd lost everything, and realize that those very moments taught me how to stand again using my own hands. Life never gives back what was taken, but it always offers us the chance to plant new seeds if we're patient enough. Thank you for listening to my story today. If you've ever walked a similar path, share it with me in the comments below. And don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to hear the next stories. I'll be here waiting to hear yours.